Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why, particularly for advanced lifters, not so much the novice, but the advanced lifter, of why it's generally a good idea to program pretty low reps, even if you're going to do higher volumes, why it's a good idea to program low reps on the big movements, and why it's better to go towards the higher rep range with certain smaller movements. And the things you guys see me doing in the background, these are perfect examples. These are perfect examples of the exercises I'm talking about. So for big exercises, you guys see me doing the closed grip bench press, all paused. You see me doing floor press. You see me doing the standing press, and then you guys see me doing skull crushers. Well, notice everything is in the 1 to 3 on all the presses, and I'm doing 10 rep sets on those skull crushers, right? So let's discuss why we do it this way. And it has to do with fatigue management and injury prevention more than anything else. And what people need to remember, fatigue management is actually part of injury prevention, because a lot of people think that it's bad form that leads to injuries, and bad form can be a factor in injuries, but it's not even the main factor unless form is just absolutely egregious. Unless it's absolutely egregious. And if people don't believe me, then look at someone like Mark Stubing. Literally the worst form you've ever seen on the planet, yet he isn't hurt yet. And technically he should be. He does multiple things that most people agree will have an extremely high injury risk. And it's not just 1 or 2, but he's still not hurt. And it's because he doesn't train that much, probably. It's just lack of fatigue problems. The guy eats a ton of food. He doesn't necessarily use a lot of volume, and yet he's still not hurt in spite of it. So here's what we know. We know that with big exercises, it's either doing too many partials to where you have certain strength weaknesses that cause you to get hurt, such as Jerry Ward, particularly when combined with drugs. All right? Or it's poor fatigue management, meaning too much total training volume that you can't recover from. That's what ultimately tends to get you hurt on the big exercises, combined particularly with maybe not enough exercise selection. So it's fatigue and it's overuse injuries related oftentimes to fatigue or too much total volume with the exact identical same movement pattern, right? That's where we run into problems. Now, for the novice lifter, that's not a big deal. Like, the novice lifter just doesn't have the work capacity and strength to really worry about these things to a large extent on big exercises, right? As long as they're using proper programming, moderate volume, proper slow progressive overload, they generally don't have these risks if their technique and form is good, right? They just don't have the same risk. They don't get hurt as easily. For more advanced lifters who actually have a lot of muscle and a lot of strength, and I'll use myself as an example. I'm relatively strong. I'm by no means the strongest guy on YouTube, but I don't see many guys in my age bracket who lift what I lift. They're there. They're there. There aren't a lot of them. So I'm above average. Above average, we'll call it that. Above average for a lifter in my age category. So I'm capable of generating a lot of workload. Right? So for me, if I were to do 10 rep sets of squats or deadlifts or even bench press, and I were to start doing multiple sets of 10 or multiple sets of 12 and try to do as many of them as I could handle in a week, my tonnages are going to be very high. In fact, they're going to be so high that I'm going to generate a lot more fatigue than I can handle. Well, what are we trying to do on big exercises? We're trying to maximize strength, trying to maximize tension, all these other things, so that we can get the most muscles possible to grow, so that we can get stronger, right? In my case, I'm a power lifter. Well, we know that size and strength have about a 90% overlap. That's what the research shows. But you can slightly bias your training towards strength. And we know that even if hypertrophy is equal, heavier weights and lower reps tend to produce better strength, particularly the lower rep aspect, right? It does give you slightly better strength outcomes per unit of muscle mass. And it's not a lot of difference, guys. It's very small, but it's there. So we tend to be able to get stronger with lower reps. We tend to get upper threshold fibers easier. What's the whole point? What are we trying to do? Why are you doing high reps? Is it for the volume? No, it's to get to the upper threshold fibers. But you're trying to get to the upper threshold fibers with slightly lighter weight because some people worry about injury risk. And then we have overlap of energy systems if you can only handle so many low rep sets versus high rep sets. And we start getting into different forms of periodization. There's a method behind this. But the whole point is that we are trying to get to the upper threshold fibers. Those are the ones that stimulate growth. What you find is that the stronger you get, the higher the workloads you have to generate to get to those upper threshold fibers. And the problem we run into with the really high reps on these big exercises is that you end up with a lot of junk volume. So let's say you're doing sets of 10 to failure, right? You're only getting 5 quality reps. You're only getting 5 quality reps that actually stimulate the upper threshold fibers. You're having 5 reps every set with a lot of weight. Because I mean, you guys, if you squat 500 pounds, your 10 rep max on a squat is pretty high. When you bench 315, 320, your 10 rep max is pretty high on a bench press. You're getting a lot of junk volume that still is being used with a lot of weight. It's creating a lot of fatigue that you have to recover from. You're creating a lot of fatigue that builds up as far as fatigue management for injury risk. It's problematic. It's problematic for your whole system. And this is what more data is emerging. In fact, I saw a couple studies the other day. I don't have them handy because I didn't save them, but I'll find them again later. That were showing that, yeah, with more advanced lifters, that it's easier to recover from the lower rep sets. Easier to recover. It's just because of the amount of junk volume involved. Again, when you're a 500-pound squatter, your 10 rep max is a lot of weight. And those first 5 reps aren't stimulating anything, but they're contributing enormously to fatigue, right? If you're doing a bunch of reps with 405, 400, or even 385, that you are not even getting any growth stimulation from, that has an enormous effect on your system in terms of recovery. So that's the problem. You're getting too much junk volume. You're better off sticking with rep ranges in which every single rep gives you a training response. Generally, not always. I mean, you can go outside of that. But from a fatigue management perspective, it makes more sense to program around that and find programming protocols that let you do that so that you minimize the junk volume. Conversely, we hop over to something like a skull crusher. Well, what is it that we're doing with smaller exercises? We're working around fatigue management. Why would you do a skull crusher? Well, maybe you want to get more long head of the tricep. Maybe your shoulders and chest and things are at all the weekly volume they can handle, but your triceps are still lagging, and so you need the extra training volume. You need the extra volume at a certain point for certain muscles because they're lagging, right? But smaller movements don't have the same systematic negative impact on your recovery. In other words, for you to really have a system-wide recovery issue from skull crushers, you would have to do hundreds and hundreds of sets probably. I mean, you really couldn't do enough. If you only did 15 sets of skull crushers in a week, even with high reps, that is not going to have a meaningful impact on your overall recovery in your body. It might at the local level of the tricep, it might at the level of the tricep tendon, but the rest of your system isn't going to be bothered. It's just not enough workload. 15 sets of 10 on the bench press sure as hell will, though. That'll have an enormous impact on your recovery. See the difference? So what it allows you to do is use more sets. They just don't have the same recovery negatives, even with higher reps, because it's just not enough weight to matter, and it's not enough load on your system to really be a major issue. Then we come down to the form. When we get to smaller exercises, we don't have the same motor unit learning component. We don't get the same strength benefits from the low reps, right? That's been noted in the data also. Smaller exercises don't get the same neuromuscular benefits from going really heavy for low reps that bigger exercises do. So you don't get the disproportionate strength. Smaller exercises just seem to be affected by their hypertrophy. That seems to be the only real factor that impacts their strength, right? In other words, you don't get stronger on the skull crusher through motor unit learning. You get stronger on the skull crusher when your triceps grow. There's far less neural adaptation. So we don't get the benefits of the low reps. What we do get, though, really low reps with heavier weights than you can really handle for any volume tend to actually increase injury risk on the smaller exercises, because smaller exercises oftentimes put muscles and tendons into unnatural positions, right? That's the problem with a lot of single joint type exercises or things that are close to single joint. They put you in unnatural positions that can load tendons and things at the wrong angles. So if you go too heavy on them and you have tendons that are already fatigued from all your other training, like your fatigue management isn't perfect, and then you start going really heavy on these smaller movements that put you at unfavorable angles for tendons and things that aren't normal natural movement patterns, and then you get form breakdown because you went too heavy, what happens? That's when you get hurt. So low reps on these sort of exercises do have a higher injury risk without real benefits. And they're not as big of a concern from a fatigue management perspective. So when you look at all of it from this perspective, it makes sense of why everyone, irrespective of what your goals are, I don't care whether your goals are physique oriented, I don't care if your goals are athletic oriented, it does make more sense to generally keep the big exercises the majority of the time in the lower rep ranges and the smaller exercises in the higher rep ranges. And this has purely to do with a programming, a fatigue management, and an injury risk perspective. That's it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.